So just back to looking at that from the buy side, how would you strategize this in terms of contracting with carriers? And I say that, as said before, we've got spot rates are increasing early January. We've got Asia Europe contracts are normally negotiated around now. Under this this period now, the first quarter also sets the scene for those contract negotiations on the Trans-Pacific in the second quarter. So, what advice would you give people buying freight?
Give the same advice I give to the clients that work with me in that area. And there's a few clients that actually ask me, how do I do this? Um, Obviously, when you are calling me when the freight rates are really high and you have zero negotiation position, that's a very tough nut to crack. There's very few clients that think long term when the market is really, really low. But there's many clients that when a situation is like this, where the carriers are raising rates and they can, to say, how do I negotiate? This is, of course, not a great negotiation position. In my experience, being on the liner side of things, the best approach to this is to have a long-term relationship with the carrier that has an index at the basis of it, whether that's CTS or preferably CTS, or whether that's the Shanghai Freight Index. That is not so relevant, but with some delay, an index will always adjust to the market reality over time. Right now, negotiating a long-term contract when you really don't know how 2025 and 2026 are going to play out is really difficult. You may get a deal that is slightly below the spot rate today, but if, as we expect, there's a significant influx of capacity, you could easily overshoot the mark. Now, we've seen time and time again where when the market is below the current contract rate, clients will walk away from the contract and vice versa. You really need to know that the guys you're dealing with are going to uphold their end of the bargain. But I would always say, if you're not clear about how the market's going to play out, make an index-based deal.
So that's on the contract, that's on the pricing, but in terms of the services, especially if you're going direct to a carrier, for example, I mean, why should shippers be saying, you guys, you've got the data, you've got the ships, why aren't you managing this better and communicating how you're managing it with me better as well, if that makes sense?
Plenty of data available and there's plenty of information available. And the famous quote is always, I work with an alliance where three carriers are on the same vessel and I get three different ETAs depending on which carrier I talk to. So I don't necessarily think it's a matter of data. I think it's if you're on top of the list of those carriers to give you the right information, I'm very confident that they will. But you need to be on top of the list. And to be on top of the list is something based on a long-term relationship where you've had this mutual trust in terms of service delivery, where it has not been a zero-sum effect where, either you win or I win, but we both win together. Usually, carriers have protected their most loyal customers through ups and downs. During the COVID pandemic, even when the freight rates were sky high, carriers have protected their core customers because they know they're with them for the long run. And they have usually gotten a very high delivery on time, even during periods of upheaval. I've seen that from personal experience, that the most loyal customers got virtually all of their cargo delivered on time at the agreed contract rate, even if the spot rate was three times that. So I would always recommend that. But again, that is based also on, for instance, committing the volume you actually need. In the Trans-Pacific contracts, many times people have a minimum order requirement that is 10% of what they actually need, because they don't want to commit themselves for more. Well, the shipping line says, listen, I've committed to 10% of the MQC, but as far as I'm concerned, the contract's been delivered. And then you're up the creek without a pedal because you didn't want to commit your full volume to the carrier of choice. You only wanted to commit a portion of the volume. So had you committed a larger proportion, you would be protected for a larger part of your cargo base.
I mean, taking from that though, if you're an SME shipper and you've maybe using a few different carriers, you're nowhere near the top of that list.
No, and if you're an SME, I would certainly say you will not get the level of dedication you might need from an individual carrier, particularly if you spread your volume over 3-4, simply because for each of those carriers, you're not significant enough to warrant the VIP treatment. So work with a freight forwarder who can spread that volume out over different carriers, and the freight forwarder will have the stamina and the respect from the carrier to do that.